Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where the Black Panther trailer numbers are in. And whoo, it just made it into the top 10 list of the most watched trailers in their first 24 hours ever, which has become a thing because, of course, it's supposed to be an indicator of how well the movie will do eventually. And for the most part, these movies do pretty well, with the exception of 50 Shades Darker, which is still in the top 5. That's right, Black Panther couldn't beat it. But anyway, Black Panther's number is 89 million, putting it at 10th place, right behind the Beauty and the Beast teaser and right ahead of the second teaser for Star Wars The Force Awakens. Not a bad spot. And again, it is in the top 10. And Wonder Woman, by the way, has never had a trailer place on this list, and it goes all the way to number 20. So I think that's very encouraging for Black Panther because Wonder Woman is doing quite nicely, and this means that Black Panther could maybe do even better. But just for some perspective, the number one trailer that was watched the most times in the first 24 hours is still Stephen King's It remake with 197. It's going to take so long for someone to unseat that because no one else is even close. That's amazing. I'm very curious to see what its box office numbers will be like, if it actually can deliver on what's, this list is supposed to be an indicator for the interest in the film, right? Fate of the Furious is number 2 with 139 million views in the first 24 hours, although methinks that's buoyed artificially to some degree by autoplay on Facebook. But, these numbers, they're all kind of played around with a little bit. For instance, the Black Panther number includes the ratings from television, so they kind of like Frankenstein these numbers, but still, this is the official list, and headlines like this are important. Headlines are a very important part of the game. Wait until we get to the viewer question. But then Thor Ragnarok is third with 136, Beauty and the Beast's first full teaser at 127, and then 50 Shades Darker at 114. Again, didn't really deliver. But this is very exciting for Black Panther that it was able to place on this list where Wonder Woman could not, and that it's in 10th place. Maybe it means that it could open bigger than 100 million in February 2018. That is Black History Month, and as we discussed when the poster came out, they don't really have any competition that month yet. Although perhaps headlines like this, again, they're important, will dissuade other studios from getting anywhere near this film. They're like, don't come near Black Panther, it will eat you alive. It would be great if it could top Deadpool or match Deadpool at 132 when that opened the same month. But where Black Panther really shined, interestingly enough, was on Twitter. It got more mentions than the NBA game that it debuted during, Game 4 of the Finals, which was a big game. And it's second only to Star Wars The Last Jedi, that teaser when that was released, in terms of Twitter chatter. Isn't that amazing? I'm telling you, Black Twitter is a powerful thing. Underestimate it at your own folly. If you want to know who else has benefited from Black Twitter, I would say television, largely. Shonda Rhimes and also Lee Daniels' Empire. Those, Shonda Rhimes has a whole programming block. But, the Black Twitter community has, not only do they comment on, certain, pop culture and news issues, but when it comes to entertainment, I think to the most part, also like Rihanna has tremendous support from. Black Twitter has willed a movie into existence. The Ava DuVernay directed Rihanna and Lupita Nyong'o movie with Issa Rae potentially scripting. I don't think her deal is closed just yet. It's going to be a Netflix movie, but that came from Twitter. Just a photo of Lupita and Rihanna sitting at a fashion show front row. So it would be interesting to see Black Twitter make the jump to movies. And if perhaps, because, once you start helping movies out, Hollywood will really take notice of you. And that could really legitimize Black Twitter. Although I think it's pretty legit as it is. Maybe it'll get an official emoji from Twitter if this happens. It's very cool. So congrats to Black Panther, off to a very good start. But again, I don't want to be too, let's not go crazy. Just like I try and keep it real with Wonder Woman, it's still number 10. It couldn't match Thor Ragnarok or Fate of the Furious or Beauty and the Beast. Let's be honest. I want to be honest in the coverage. Keep those expectations manageable, and let's not have the conversation and the hype get away from us. All right, but it's still very, very good. Now, speaking of Deadpool, there was a casting announcement that they've put a Japanese actress, Shioli Katsuna in a key mystery role. And there are a number of characters she could be playing because, they could just change the ethnicity as they have done with Domino, who's gone from a white character to a black character with the casting of Atlanta's Zazie Beetz. We already have Jubilee, Lady Deathstrike, and Psylocke in the movies. So I'm guessing maybe one of the original X-Force members. There's Copycat, who's supposed to be Morena Baccarin. We'll see if she gets there. Feral, but that's so similar to Wolfsbane, which they're introducing over in New Mutants, played by Maisie Williams from Game of Thrones. Maybe Boom Boom, very popular, X-Force member, founding member. But, again, she could honestly be anyone. And she's clearly there to help Deadpool with the Asian box office, the holy Asian trinity of box office, China, Japan, and South Korea. So they've cast this actress, and this follows hot on the heels of another casting announcement that actress of color Hannah John Kamen has been cast in another mystery role for Ant-Man and Wasp, coming from Marvel also in 2018. And of course, Zhang Zi, we talked about the other day, has been cast in a pivotal role at Monarch, the organization that oversees monster research in the MonsterVerse, with Godzilla and King Kong. But what I wanted to talk about, because again, these actresses could be playing anybody. What I thought was interesting is that they continue to bring diversity to film largely through the female cast members. And I'm wondering what it's going to take to have some male diversity, right? Why don't you change the, they did it with Deadshot with Will Smith, but, could you change the ethnicity of Cable? Is that an option? I guess not considering his parentage, but still, it always seems to be the ingenue that brings diversity to the table, which is one of the reasons I'm excited about the upcoming Tomb Raider movie, because the male lead there, opposite Alicia Vikander, is Daniel Wu, which I think is very exciting, a Chinese actor, but also he happens to have his own TV show on AMC, Badlands, Into the Badlands. So I'm curious how you feel about it. And, of course, we have Miles Morales, but that's going to debut. He got a nice little shout out at the PlayStation 4 Spider-Man gameplay trailer, but also, he has a movie coming up, but it's going to be animated. So I'm curious to how you feel about the way diversity is being handled, and I think we've got female diversity set. What do you think it'll take to make the jump to more male diversity? And speaking of male diversity, Idris Elba is like the poster man. I don't want to call him a boy, the poster man for diversity in Hollywood, sometimes to his annoyance. He made a beautiful speech about diversity in entertainment back in the UK. A really wonderful thing about my favorite line was, he said the character description was only described as having a sparkle in his eyes, and he was like, they wouldn't let me audition, but if you ask my wife, she says I have a sparkle in my eye. And I'm like, you do have a sparkle in your eye, Idris Elba. Those people should be ashamed for not letting you audition. But anyway, he's been trying to make it here in the U.S., and I think the Bond talk has hurt him a little bit, because some people are so against the idea of changing the ethnicity of Bond. That anger is transferred to him, to the point that Naomi Harris, who came up with the idea, has said, his fellow Brit actor of color, she has said that he's actually come to her and said, please stop talking about it. You're hurting my career. But anyway, speaking of his career, the reason he's in the news today is that he's going back to the small screen for season 5 of Luther. Now, The Wire, of course, is a show that many of you know him from, but Luther is the show that really put him on the map and on Hollywood's radar, that made him leading man material. He's had, I think to some degree, a similar path that Benedict Cumberbatch has had. Big BBC star, big heartthrob, had a hard time jumping to not just movies, but to Hollywood. But Benedict Cumberbatch finally made it with Doctor Strange. Very good performance, big, successful film. Although I don't know what his career is going to look like post Doctor Strange, to be perfectly honest with you. But he has gone back to Sherlock. His role, Benedict Cumberbatch has gone back to play Sherlock, although he said it's not going to happen that often going forward. Let's just take a break. And Martin Freeman has also, he's in Black Panther, speaking of Black Panther, but he's also, he was in the Hobbit movies, but he's also struggled a little bit to get out of the television box. Literally. So I'm concerned about Idris Elba doing season 5 of Luther. I mean, on the one hand, I understand it. He's got to keep chatter going. He's got to keep his fan base base primed, and his movies aren't particularly working. I don't have a lot of faith in Dark Tower doing for him what we would like it to do, and I think The Mountain Between Us looks great with him opposite Kate Winslet, but I don't see that being a big moneymaker. So I don't see a big breakout hit on the horizon for him, unfortunately. I wish he could get out of his Marvel contract so he could play Jon Stewart, the Green Lantern Jon Stewart, but I don't honestly see that happening. And he is in Thor Ragnarok. He's in the trailer for just a little second, looking an awful lot like Bishop from X-Men. But anyway, I'm curious, what do you think of Idris Elba doing this? I think that in considering that he doesn't have a lot of offers on the table, he should do it. I would do it if I were him. But it's unfortunate that he hasn't really found his Doctor Strange yet. But I'm curious, how do you think Idris Elba's career is going? Do you want him to, return to Luther? And do you think he'll ever get something, be able to get that breakout role like Benedict Cumberbatch has with Doctor Strange? Then as for the viewer question today, this comes from Between Two Lungs. And Between Two Lungs says, we're all between two lungs, right? So I guess your heart is between your two lungs, which makes your screen name actually pretty poetic. But anyway, Between Two Lungs says, Grace, why is there enthuses on the domestic box office, which I believe is the US. I'm from the UK. It is the domestic box office here in the United States. Surely the gross worldwide box office is all that matters, because let's face it, money speaks in Hollywood. Do the studios get smaller percentages overseas? They do. They only get, I'd say overall, the rule of thumb is about 50% of their overall total box office is the way it usually shakes out. That's the way Hollywood usually looks at these things. I'm sure there's, numbers go up and down a little bit, but that's basically the situation. And the reason they get less of a percentage overseas is because they need to partner with another distributor to handle it over there. Sometimes they have distribution shingles overseas, but for the most part, somebody else has to distribute it and therefore gets to share in the profits. But anyway, they also make a lot less money overseas, and that's the main reason that the domestic box office gets so many headlines. Now, the only other big chunks of money coming in these days are from China, which, by the way, I think is really responsible for an emphasized focus on foreign box office, because you can get those big numbers. You can say this movie made 100 million here and it made 100 million there, and everyone goes, maybe I should see it if it's making chunks of $100 million, because most of the other countries, they're very small amounts of money, and they only become impressive when you roll them all into one. And since movies don't open, they're starting to open day and date more and more often, which comes up with some sexy numbers, but for the most part, there's a bit of a rollout. For instance, Cars 3 is going to roll out, so there's not going to be a big number coming from overseas until, the end of the game, when they're like, here's the end total. And, for instance, let's take Wonder Woman. The biggest chunk that it's earned so far is that 100 million opening weekend in the United States. If it weren't for that 100 million opening weekend, it wouldn't have this amazing headline to be able to show everybody. It would just be, chugging along. And I think that's, it's like big leaps forward. And I think it makes the box office more exciting, right? It's like a slam dunk, as opposed, sure, it's still worth just 2 points, but it gets everybody's attention. So, in basketball, that's what I'm talking about. So I think that's why the big chunks is what matters. And worldwide, until you start, and that's why China has, really been a game changer. But until other countries start being able to deliver box office chunks, and even totals on par with what the United States and China can deliver, they're just not going to get a lot of attention. Like, you might recall that The Mummy had the biggest opening ever in South Korea with like 6.5 million. So that's not no one's going to be like, $6.5 million. Wow, I should see The Mummy. Nobody said, The Mummy, that's why they focus so much on the international debut for The Mummy, because it was 141. But, again, you want that headline. The headline instills faith from the audience. It piques people's interest. It gets further deals signed. So it's all about generating the headline. But worldwide box office is being paid attention to a lot more when it comes to totals. That shift is taking place Between Two Lungs. You're right there. I think that opening weekends are still very much domestic based. And you'll see a headline occasionally like Beauty and the Beast getting 500 million domestically, which is rare. But now when I see people talk about totals domestic, you're like, who the hell cares about the domestic total? Look at the worldwide total. So I think today, the way to really judge a movie is its opening, both domestic and worldwide, its overseas debut. The Chinese number, both opening there and overall. And then, because that's really only where, these are the only places the money comes from, and then those worldwide totals. And then you can start also looking at regions if you want to. Like we just talked today about, the Asian Trinity, China, Japan, and South Korea in terms of box office. But there's no other Trinity in the world. As I've told you before, the big countries are, you know them, China, Japan, South Korea, Russia, Mexico, Australia, the UK. That's really the only places that, I think I said Mexico, right? Those are really the only countries where movies make big chunks of money. Everywhere else, it just has to, be rolled into the total. So and those aren't sexy headlines. It made 2 million here, it made 11 here. Oh my goodness. That's not going to cut it. All right, so that's today's morning movie news. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please write down below what you think today's top 3 stories. Between Two Lungs is a viewer question. Anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.